Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And this one, oh boy, this one's going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, this one's really interesting.
We're going back to the late 19th century, a time that feels both familiar. We think about the 1800s, but then also strangely different.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to explore this period through the lens of one man's life,
Oh, yeah.
a man named T.J. Hampton.
Right.
Our main source today is his Wikipedia article,
Ah,
which, as you'll see, it's a bit like a historical puzzle box.
okay.
It tells a story, it gives us some pieces, but it leaves these gaps that spark even more curiosity.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. The article paints this picture of a drifter, almost a ghost,
Really?
moving through the American South, leaving a trail of violence.
Wow.
But it's what we don't know about him that really captures the imagination.
That's so true. It's like, where did he come from? We know his name was Thomas J. Hampton,
Right.
and that he met his end on the gallows in Lake City, Florida in 1901.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, his early life, it's just a complete blank. It makes you wonder what events, what circumstances might have set him on this dark path.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about like a true crime story here.
Right.
We're talking about a time when record keeping was just so spotty,
Yeah.
especially for someone on the fringes of society like Hampton.
Right.
Imagine trying to piece together a life with only a handful of scattered clues, you know? It's a challenge for historians, but it also says something about the era itself.
It does. Yeah. Okay. So let's unpack what we do know, starting with his first confirmed crime in 1887.
Okay.
Picture this. All right. A freight train
Okay.
rumbling through South Carolina, and on board, a conductor going about his duties.
Yeah.
Then, seemingly out of nowhere, T.J. Hampton appears
Wow.
and commits murder.
On a train.
Yeah.
It's like adding a layer of both randomness and chilling calculation
What is strange.
to his profile, you know?
Yeah.
But what's perhaps even more striking is that he gets away with it.
Yeah.
He vanishes, seemingly into thin air, which brings us to another key aspect of this era: limited law enforcement capabilities.
Right. It's almost like trying to catch smoke.
Yeah.
Right. There's no widespread communication networks, no fingerprint databases. It's just vast distances.
Right.
And a criminal who knows how to disappear.
Right.
It makes you wonder what kind of impact that had on communities back then.
Yeah.
Were people constantly living with this sense of unease, knowing that someone like Hampton could just slip in and out of their lives undetected?
Absolutely. And this point about crossing state lines is particularly crucial.
Yeah.
Hampton's movements highlight a significant challenge for law enforcement at the time: jurisdiction.
Oh, right.
Imagine trying to coordinate an investigation across multiple states with limited communication, no centralized system for sharing information.
Right.
It was a recipe for criminals to slip through the cracks.
Wow. So from 1887 to 1893, Hampton is essentially a phantom
Right.
moving through the South. The article mentions 2 unsolved murders in Georgia during this period, but the details are so vague.
Oh, wow.
We don't know the victims, the circumstances, or even if Hampton was definitively involved.
It's just adding to that feeling of this, shadowy, almost mythical figure.
Right, yeah. And then in 1893, he resurfaces.
Oh, okay.
This time in Fort White, Florida, working at a turpentine camp.
Mm.
It's here that the story takes a more concrete and, frankly, more violent turn.
Oh, wow.
This is where we see a shift in Hampton's MO.
Okay.
Instead of these isolated, seemingly random acts, he shoots 3 men,
Wow.
Cecil Calhoun and John Bell, who are killed, and J.W. Holliday, who is wounded but survives.
Okay.
It's a much bolder, more public display of violence,
Yeah.
which makes you wonder what triggered this change.
That's a fascinating question, and one that, unfortunately, we may never have the answer to.
Right.
But what we can say for sure is that the Fort White murders mark a turning point in the story.
Yeah.
This time, there's no disappearing act. Hampton is arrested and charged. And it's during this period that we get a glimpse into the complex racial dynamics of the era.
Because it's not just a simple arrest and trial.
Right.
Governor William Sherman Jennings actually assigned state troopers to protect Hampton from potential lynching.
Wow.
We're talking about the Jim Crow South, a time and place where racial tensions were incredibly high,
Right.
and the threat of mob violence was very real.
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder of the climate of fear and prejudice that permeated society at the time.
Yeah.
Here you have a man accused of these heinous crimes, yet the governor feels compelled to take extraordinary measures to ensure he receives a fair trial, like a stark illustration of how deeply ingrained these racial tensions were.
It really is. And this brings us to the final chapter of Hampton's story.
Okay.
He's convicted, sentenced to hang, and the date is set for December 6, 1901 in Lake City.
Hmm.
Governor Jennings signs the death warrant, and on that fateful day, Hampton is led to the gallows.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We have these eyewitness accounts describing Hampton standing on the gallows, wow, calmly smoking a cigarette.
Really?
Then right before the execution, he confesses.
Oh, wow.
Not just to the murders in Fort White, but also to the train conductor's murder and the 2 unsolved murders in Georgia.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What are we to make of this last-minute revelation?
It's a question that's puzzled historians for over a century.
Really?
Was it remorse? A genuine desire to, clear his conscience before facing his maker? Or was it something else?
Right.
Maybe a final act of defiance, a way to control the narrative even in his final moments.
It's almost like he's saying, you might have caught me, but you'll never truly understand me.
Right.
He takes those secrets to the grave, leaving us to grapple with the why behind his actions. We're going to need to dig a bit deeper into that.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling the answers, or at least the clues, are going to be just as intriguing as the questions themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We left off with T.J. Hampton's confession on the gallows. It's a dramatic twist
It really is.
that really brings those final moments to life.
Yeah,
But it adds another layer to the mystery, doesn't it?
it does.
What do you make of his decision to confess after all those years of silence?
Well, it's a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
It continues to intrigue historians.
Yeah.
Some speculate it was a genuine act of remorse,
Mm-hmm.
a way to unburden his soul
Yeah.
before meeting his maker, right?
Right.
Others see it as a more calculated move, a
Oh.
way to seize control of the narrative and leave a lasting mark on history.
It's almost like he's saying, you might have caught me, but you'll never truly understand me.
Yeah, you're right.
He takes those secrets to the grave, leaving us to grapple with the why behind his actions.
And that brings us to, I think, a crucial point about understanding figures like Hampton. We have to acknowledge the limitations of historical records.
Yeah.
We're piecing together a story based on this fragmented information, often filtered through the lens of those in power. Newspaper accounts, trial transcripts, they all paint a particular picture.
Right.
But it's not necessarily the complete picture.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly.
Right. We're left to fill in the gaps,
Yeah.
to make inferences based on the limited evidence we have.
Right.
It makes me wonder, how do we as, modern listeners approach this kind of historical mystery responsibly?
Well, I think it's about being both curious and critical, right?
Okay.
We delve into the existing records,
Huh.
but we also question them.
Right.
Who wrote these accounts?
Yeah.
What were their biases?
Yeah.
What might have been left out? And perhaps most importantly, we recognize that there are perspectives we may never fully access.
Right.
Voices silenced by time and circumstance.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and events.
Right.
It's about people, their lives, and the choices they made within a very specific context.
Absolutely.
And in Hampton's case, that context is particularly important.
Yeah, we can't ignore the fact that Hampton was a black man operating in the Jim Crow South.
Right.
This wasn't just a backdrop to his life. It was a pervasive system of racial segregation and oppression
Right.
that impacted every aspect of his existence.
So when we think about Hampton's crimes, we can't simply label him a monster and move on.
Right.
We have to ask ourselves, how did this system, this environment of fear and injustice, shape his worldview?
Yeah.
How did it influence his actions?
I think it's about recognizing the complexity of human behavior, right?
Yeah.
I don't condone his crimes,
Right.
but we seek to understand the forces that might have contributed to them.
Right.
And that's where this, historical empathy comes in.
Okay.
It's not about excusing actions, but about trying to see the world through the eyes of someone living in a very different time.
It's like trying to imagine yourself walking in Hampton's shoes,
Yeah.
experiencing the world as he did,
Right.
facing those same prejudices and limitations.
Exactly.
It's a challenging exercise.
It is.
But I think it can lead to a more nuanced understanding of his story.
It really can. And that's where I think this deep dive is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's not just about solving a crime or unraveling a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
It's about engaging with the past in a way that forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions.
It makes me think about those 2 unsolved murders in Georgia.
Right.
We know so little about them,
Yeah.
but they occurred during a time when violence against Black people often went uninvestigated, unpunished.
Right.
How do we even begin to uncover those lost stories, those lives cut short?
It's a difficult but important question. And I think it's a reminder that the historical record is often incomplete,
Hmm.
particularly when it comes to marginalized communities.
Yeah.
But it also underscores the importance of continuing to ask these questions, to seek out those missing voices,
Yeah.
and to challenge the narratives that have been passed down through generations.
And sometimes, I guess, those answers might lead to even more
Well,
questions.
absolutely.
It's like peeling back layers of a historical onion, revealing new complexities with each layer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of historical inquiry, right?
Yeah.
It's a process of ongoing discovery, challenging our preconceived notions, and recognizing that the past is never truly settled.
Right.
It's always open to reinterpretation. As new evidence emerges, new perspectives are brought to light.
Speaking of reinterpretations, let's shift our focus back to those law enforcement challenges we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Knowing how easily Hampton evaded capture,
Right.
how do you think that impacted the communities he passed through?
Well, I think it likely fostered a climate of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Imagine living in a town where a stranger could commit a violent crime and simply vanish.
Right.
It would make you question the safety of your community,
Right.
the effectiveness of law enforcement,
Yeah.
and even your own ability to protect yourself and your loved ones.
It's interesting to think about that ripple effect. The way a single individual can leave a lasting impact on multiple communities. And it also highlights how crucial communication and information sharing are in combating crime.
Absolutely. And this need for better communication and coordination would eventually lead to significant changes in law enforcement.
Right.
The development of national fingerprint databases,
Mm-hmm.
the creation of federal agencies like the FBI.
Right.
These innovations were, in part, a response to the challenges posed by criminals like Hampton,
Mm-hmm.
who could exploit the limitations of a fragmented system.
It's fascinating how the past informs the present.
It is.
You know how those struggles and shortcomings can ultimately drive innovation and progress?
Precisely, and that's another key takeaway, I think, from our deep dive.
Yeah.
By studying the past, by understanding the challenges and triumphs of those who came before us, we gain valuable insights into our own present and future.
Right.
We see how systems evolve, how societies adapt, and how the pursuit of justice is this ongoing process, constantly shaped by the lessons of history.
It's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of dusty stories.
Yeah.
It's a living, breathing tapestry that continues to influence the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
We've been exploring the life and crimes of T.J. Hampton, this figure shrouded in mystery.
Right.
And it's striking how his story, it intersects with the evolution of law enforcement.
Yeah.
It's like holding a magnifying glass up to a very specific moment in time,
Right.
revealing those cracks in the system that someone like Hampton could slip through.
It's a stark contrast to the world we live in today.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, news traveled slowly.
Right.
Record keeping was inconsistent.
Right.
Coordinating investigations across state lines was a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
It's almost unfathomable in our age of instant communication and these interconnected databases.
Right. It makes you appreciate how advancements like fingerprinting and national crime databases
Yeah.
have revolutionized the way we investigate and apprehend criminals.
Wow.
But it also makes you wonder, how did communities grapple with that constant sense of vulnerability,
Yeah.
knowing that someone like Hampton could just disappear so easily?
I think it likely fostered a culture of suspicion and vigilance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Rumors would spread like wildfire, fueled by limited information and, a healthy dose of fear. Imagine, like, the conversations around dinner tables, the whispers in the general store,
Yeah.
the anxiety that would ripple through a town after a stranger passed through.
It's a side of history we don't often consider.
Yeah.
The emotional impact of crime and that
Mhm.
sense of unease that lingers long after the headlines fade.
And it brings us to another important point,
Okay.
the role of media.
Mm,
Newspapers were the primary source of information back then,
right,
but they often sensationalized stories,
right,
focusing on the gruesome details,
right.
rather than providing, a balanced account of the facts.
So you're reading about these crimes, but you're only getting this fragmented, often exaggerated version of the truth.
Right.
It makes you wonder how much of what we know about Hampton is based on actual events
Right.
versus the narratives spun by those newspapers.
Yeah, it's a challenge for historians. We
Yeah.
have to sift through those layers of bias and sensationalism
Right.
to try to get at the heart of the story.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most valuable insights come from reading between the lines.
Okay.
Paying attention to what isn't said,
Right.
what might have been deliberately omitted or downplayed.
It's like we're playing detective, not just with the crimes themselves,
Yeah.
but with the historical record itself.
Right.
We're constantly asking, what's the full story here?
Right.
And whose voices are missing from this narrative?
And that's where I think our deep dive takes us beyond the specific case of T.J. Hampton.
Okay.
It forces us to confront the limitations of historical knowledge,
Right.
to acknowledge that some questions may never have definitive answers.
Right.
But the act of asking those questions, of grappling with that ambiguity, is what makes history so compelling.
It reminds us that the past is never truly settled.
Right.
It's constantly being reinterpreted as new evidence emerges and new perspectives are brought to light.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to approach history with a critical eye,
Yeah.
to question the narratives we've been given,
Right.
and to always be open to the possibility that there's more to the story than meets the eye.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we're left with a sense of both fascination and unease. We've glimpsed the world through the eyes of, a drifter and a killer.
Yeah.
A man who navigated a system riddled with flaws
Right.
and exploited those flaws to his advantage.
And while the specifics of T.J. Hampton's story may fade with time,
Yeah.
the broader themes resonate deeply.
Right.
We see the evolution of law enforcement, the
Mhm.
power of media narratives, and this
Mhm.
enduring challenge of piecing together a complete picture of the past.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names.
Right.
It's about understanding the forces that shape our world, the complexities of human behavior,
Yeah.
and that constant pursuit of a more just and equitable society.
And perhaps, most importantly, it's about recognizing that the past is never truly behind us.
Right.
It informs our present,
Yeah.
shapes our perspective,
Right.
and challenges us to learn from the mistakes and triumphs of those who came before us.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows of history.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those hidden truths that lie beneath the surface.